Sound check, 1, 2, 3. Sound check, 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting of June 17, 2024. A reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. We do have quorum from today, and I'd like to call the meeting of Public Works Committee to order. Online, we have Councillor Francis and Councillor Tattison. In chambers today, Councillor McMeekin, Councillor Wang, Councillor Maureen Wilson, Councillor John Paul Danko, Councillor Beatty, Councillor Kassar, Councillor Crutch, and Councillor Alex Wilson. We also have an abundance of staff here. Welcome, everyone. And we will move on to our ceremonial activities today. We have an exciting announcement about the Waste and Recycling Workers Week. Recognizes and celebrates all those who work in the waste and recycling industry as frontline responders. Throughout this week, the city will show its appreciation and recognize the commitment of staff by highlighting the important work that they do through videos and photos shared across the city's various social media channels. The city is extremely proud of the sensational service provided by all our waste management staff, and their hard work is too often overlooked. It is the dedication and hard work of our staff that drives success in the Waste Management Division and keeps our curbside clean all year round. I also want to congratulate the city's waste management team on their recognition as leaders in waste education. The City of Hamilton received 4 awards for waste promotion and education at the Municipal Waste Association's Spring Workshop on May 29th. The MWA's, well, that's cool, Promotion and Education Awards are granted each year to municipalities that display exceptional creativity and ingenuity in educating residents about waste. City of Hamilton received a Gold Award for the Off-Campus Student Move and Waste Education Initiative, a second Gold Award for the Multi-Language Postcard, and a Silver Award for the Waste Management Open House and Facility Tours held during Waste Reduction Week. Educating residents about waste is a key factor in having a successful waste management program in Hamilton, which in turn protects the environment and our community. Congratulations to the entire waste management staff and the Public Works. Elsie McIntosh, as we move on to the agenda, any changes for today?
Chair Spatafora, the following changes were made to the agenda. Number 4, approval of minutes of previous meeting, June 3rd, 2024. Delegation requests, 6.2, delegation requests respecting the Hamilton Street Railway HSR fare policies for today's meeting. Mary Love, Council of Canadians Hamilton Chapter in person. Katie King, HCBN in person. Tim Nolan, Accessibility Hamilton Alliance in person. Brad Evoy, Disability Justice Network of Ontario in person. And Chelsea McDonald virtually, which was withdrawn. And number 8, staff presentations. Woodward Water Treatment Plant Phase 2 upgrades, PW 22078A citywide. A revised presentation was published to the agenda.
Thank you, Clerk. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda? Councillor Kassar, Councillor Alex Wilson. Excuse me. Any discussion on the agenda as presented? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote. That carries 11-0. Thank you. Looking around, any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, 4.1, June 3rd, 2024. May I please have a mover and second to approve the minutes? Councillor Beatty, Councillor Wang. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote. That carries 11-0. Thank you. Moving on to delegation requests. May I please have a mover and second to approve the delegation requests? Councillor Alex Wilson, Councillor Crutch. Any discussion on the delegations? All right, let's move to the vote. That carries 11-0. Thank you. Moving on to delegations. Members are reminded that questions of the delegations are for clarification purposes only and not for debate. The delegate will have 5 minutes to speak. You'll hear a tone after 4 minutes, and then you'll have an additional minute to finish. First, I'll call on 7.1, James Kemp. There you are, James. Whenever you're ready, James.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson and members of the Public Works Committee. Thank you for taking the time to hear from me today. I am here to speak regarding the HSR's change last year from rear door primary access to front door primary access. I would also like to speak to the lack of accessible fare payment options available to those using HSR. I'm not going to waste anybody's time discussing the cancellation of the voluntary pay or the no pay program, except to say that we are 2 weeks away from this being enacted, and we have yet to see the HSR do anything to address the long list of issues and barriers this decision has created. I won't give you the full history again, but voluntary pay is introduced because the HSR either couldn't be bothered or couldn't afford to find an alternate means of paying fare except for the fare Fred box at the front. In 20 plus years, they've made no effort to solve this problem. Regardless of that, things were going well for the rear door access policy into the lockdowns. Suddenly, the HSR had to make the hard choice to exclude us from the service temporarily because a driver would need to ignore distancing and drop the back ramp. 2 months later, front door access was adopted in earnest. For the most part, this went well while the buses were running at a reduced capacity. Most of us could still access the service and the drivers would remain safe. When restrictions came down, front door policy still stood, but it was a suggestion only. Drivers would often drop the back ramp or would exceed the request to drop the back ramp. However, the HSR saw this as an opportunity to correct the problem that had vexed them for so long: fare payment. Shortly before the Fare Assist program was approved last year, the HSR shifted to a front door only policy, and our experiences got so much worse. I'm not exaggerating for effect when I say that I often find the HSR a hostile and inaccessible place, and the most recent policy changes have become a clear barrier to using the service. How is it hostile? Well, let's cover the loading. We used to wait by the back and would be loaded on while the other passengers waited by the front to board. Not ideal in bad weather, but it reduced the traffic inside the bus during loading. The driver would come back and assess the compartment, and they would indicate who needed to move and where in order that the fewest need to be disrupted. No one disagreed with the driver's authority to do so. Now, with the front door only policy, the driver rarely even checks the mirror to see if it's even possible to load from the front. They just drop the front ramp regardless. We then board to find several people in the safe path to the PMD positions. We then have to ask everyone to move while we load in, and the compartment becomes chaos. People often move from the right side and sit in the exact PMD position we need to get to. It is even more chaotic if there is already a PMD position filled and everyone along the entire right side has to move. I've been injured by and have injured other passengers during this process. And then we have to do it all over again on the way out, fighting against the crush of passengers trying to use the same door we need. Each time this experience occurs, I experience more hostility, as though no one wants us there. It shouldn't be like this. It doesn't have to be like this. On a side note, the number of close calls I have seen where a person has tried to get on while the ramp was deploying and almost smacked themselves in the head number in the dozens. It is only a matter of time before they do. Transit can be a welcoming place. Oftentimes, the HSR has pointed to the TTC and said, we are doing exactly what they are doing. Not even close, it turns out. A colleague informed me of all the accessibility features he experienced with the TTC, and there are many. I don't want to steal his thunder, but 3 Presto scanners on board, one at the front, one at the back, and a portable hand scanner. Better loading and unloading procedures, better driver training, friendlier service, better grab bars and restraints, and so on. I've since confirmed this with relatives from Toronto. When my colleague told me this story, I could see how much he enjoyed the experience compared to ours, and I wondered what somebody from Toronto would think about our transit system if they visited Hamilton. I cannot argue against the HSR requiring us to pay fare, but they have to provide accessible means to do so. Forcing us to conform to what everyone else can do is cruel and unusual and shows a clear lack of empathy. The HSR has a duty to accommodate, but has instead told us to adapt without addressing any of our concerns. This shows a clear misunderstanding of the nature of disability. It's not something you just get over and figure out. If the HSR wants us to pay, they need to invest the money in their buses, procedures, and driver training first so that we can, no matter what our disabilities or capabilities are. And then we come to Presto. Presto. The entire province is all in on Presto, and for many, I'm sure it is a convenient and useful replacement for the more conventional fare payment methods. I mean, aren't smartphones wonderful devices? The power to do everything in the palm of your hand is pretty incredible, isn't it? From paying bills to listening to music, playing games, to paying your bus fare. Truly wonderful things, unless you have difficulties with that marvelous technology. Then it becomes as barrier as unassailable as any wall. For whatever reason, there are people being left behind from this golden age of communication, from the physical ability to use it, to the ability to afford the hardware or the bandwidth, to being able to comprehend the software, being able to reach accessibility features behind more and more paywalls, the list goes on. Well, we wish everyone could operate at the same level. That just isn't the reality yet. The simple fact is that a small percentage of the population require accommodation beyond Presto. The AODA cites a conventional transit required to offer accommodation with regards to fare payment. That was in 2006. It's now 2024, and the HSR and by extension ATS wants to integrate the services and actively working towards that goal. They have to provide the same level of accommodation on conventional that they haven't explored these options. Why can't they create a billing and mail order system with a displayable paper pass or some other such option? Accommodation is a basic human right. In conclusion, the HSR has made no effort to make the conventional service accessible despite our consultations highlighting our concerns. Please ask the HSR to take this issue back to the drawing board for a rethink. At a minimum, it will require a significant investment in equipment and training. I've been a rider on the HSR ever since I was a boy. I think the fare was 35 cents. I've been proud of our transit system and still think it can be a jewel if given the opportunity despite the last decade of difficulties. Please help us by stopping this cruel practice before it is fully implemented. We gave it a year to get better. It has not. I could go on for a while, but I'm out of time. I want to thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you, James. Any questions from committee? Councillor Alex Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you, James. And I know you had to rush through to fit within the time limit there. I was trying to take notes throughout. I think the one piece I missed was I heard the point that Presto's not an accessible solution, and then I heard your recommendation. Are you just able to elaborate on some of the reasons or some of the concerns you have with Presto to better understand what are some of those solves? I've heard about the placement of the fare pass, and I understand that, but it seems like you took Presto specifically and said there's accessibility concerns, not just where the reader is, but with the system itself. Are you able to elaborate on those?
Yes, there's a couple of different issues. One is the Presto card itself. Being able to manipulate a Presto card, as I said, forget about where the scanner is, but just manipulating the card itself can often be very difficult for a lot of people, depending on day to day. But the service itself is a very complicated system. Requires codes to access the operator system, which I found when I lost a card. It's constantly updating, so even when people start getting used to the system, the software changes, their screen reader adaptability changes. It's very awkward. The paywalls themselves are very awkward for a lot of people with devices. From what I understand, iPhone users don't seem to have so much problem, but people using lower range phones are often having accessibility issues because their phones don't come equipped with the right features. There's technological issues that haven't been solved with Presto, and they just keep pushing forward. I was part of a research project that studied this exact issue, and Presto came up quite a lot as a subject of concern.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate that. I just wasn't able to get those notes down during your delegation. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else on the list, thank you, James, for your delegation.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to 7.2, Jake Maurice. Welcome, Jake, whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jake Maurice. I'm a manual wheelchair user and a service dog handler. I am speaking today to share my experiences and barriers using the HSR since the implementation of the front boarding policy, as well as my concerns with the recent change to the fare payment for persons with mobility devices and the Fare Assist program. When front boarding on buses, I experienced many barriers. One barrier is that most of the time passengers sitting in the front priority seating either won't move or are unable to move. This presents a barrier because I cannot fit past the other passengers when front boarding. I've had my rims or wheels accidentally hit other passengers seated in this area. This is something that can and has been avoided by boarding on the rear entrance on buses. Another barrier I experience with front boarding is that oftentimes drivers will not leave their seat to assist with lifting the seats or securing my wheelchair. This means that I have to either bring a support person or rely on the kindness of other passengers for assistance. This is something that reduces my ability to independently travel safely with HSR. A concern I have with the combination of front boarding and the fare payment requirement is around safety. As a manual wheelchair user, I use momentum to get up the ramp and onto the bus. I am also handling a service dog. This means that stopping where the Presto machines are currently positioned would likely result in injury to myself or my service dog. It could also result in me rolling backwards off the bus. There are no grab bars or adequate room aboard buses to allow for me to safely stop and tap onto Presto machines. In February of this year, I visited Toronto and utilized the TTC. The TTC has Presto machines on both the front and rear entrances of their buses. When boarding the TTC, wheelchair users load in the front while other passengers load in the rear. This allows for wheelchair users to board without having to navigate other passengers being in the way. The TTC also has buses that are actually designed for front boarding and have ample space along with grab bars for wheelchair users to be able to safely tap on. The TTC also utilizes handheld machines to assist mobility device users who are unable to tap on. These are features that the HSR would need to implement in order to allow safe and accessible fare payment options. HSR is not designed for front-boarding wheelchair users, and as such, the policy to only allow front-boarding and requiring wheelchair users to tap on for fare payment is something that will result in injury to wheelchair users and other passengers. The decision to revoke the optional fare pay system puts disabled people at risk. It is unreasonable to expect people with mobility devices to pay fare, especially when it is unsafe for them to do so and no accessible options for fare payment on board HSR exists at this time. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Jake, just looking around, any speakers? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up, we have Mary Love. Hi, Mary, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you on behalf of the Hamilton chapter of the Council of Canadians for giving me this opportunity to address you. First, let me introduce the COC. Founded in 1984 by people such as Tommy Douglas, Margaret Atwood, Maud Barlow, Mel Hurtig, and Farley Mowat, our mission is to bring people together through collective action and grassroots organizing to challenge corporate power and advocate for people, the planet, and our democracy. As part of pursuing this mission in Hamilton, our chapter, along with Hamilton 350, was involved in the free, frequent, and electric transit campaign leading up to the 2022 municipal election, where we asked the city to set up a committee to study the feasibility of making this vision a reality, as it is in many other cities. 6 of those candidates who publicly endorsed this transit proposal were elected and now sit on City Council. And you know who you are. Our COC chapter calls on this committee to show leadership in compassion and extend the cutoff date of the voluntary fare program and the affordable monthly pass. We ask you to show true understanding and compassion to those who will be hard put to get around if a 30% discount is all they can count on. Our other reason for asking for an extension is that we do not believe that those who will be most impacted by these programs being cut are prepared for them ending. Our chapter is very concerned about people with disabilities unprepared to pay being possibly denied entry to the bus in the early days of July. This could mean important medical and other appointments lost if the passenger is dependent on the willingness or ability of the driver to waive the new restriction. We know that the ATU supports inclusivity, but what will the HSR expect of its drivers in this regard? We are also concerned for those Hamiltonians with disabilities for whom barriers to navigating the proposed replacement program will exist. These barriers include time-sensitive bureaucratic hoops, such as applying for and obtaining a Presto card in time. They also include keeping hold of the Presto card or constantly coming up with exact change. All these tasks may seem simple, but if your accommodation is transitory or unstable, your belongings are therefore never secure. Many other conditions of both poverty and disability, and the two often go hand in hand, will make accessing the Fare Assist program far from equitable. The most vulnerable and isolated among us often lack the support network needed to even know about, let alone apply for and navigate a new program. A low literacy level, including computer literacy, limited access to online service, especially now with library computers down, and cognitive difficulties that make using a computer or smartphone unattainable are also huge barriers to accessibility and inclusion. Our chapter calls on you to put your fiduciary responsibility ahead of a more narrow fiscal lens when considering the way forward on transit decisions. Fiduciary responsibility, in a nutshell, is the duty of the powerful to keep faith with the vulnerable. Vulnerable people in this city, including those who are poor and those who have disabilities, whether visible or invisible, and those who are both poor and disabled, are really hurting. There's the lack of attainable housing, and there's the increase in the price of food. I invite you committee members to visit Gore Park on Saturday mornings. The lineups are so huge now. People line up for food on very cold days and very sweltering days. When I've had unexpected vet bills or home repairs, I've been there myself. Many of those in line are new immigrants and many are longtime Hamiltonians. So Hamilton is a city hurting. Your choice is whether you will add another financial anxiety and mobility burden onto the backs of those who can least withstand it, or whether you will push pause on the June 30th deadline for the end of the Affordable Pass and voluntary pay programs and extend the deadline once more. As the Disability Justice Network of Ontario asks, who are we building transit for in Hamilton in the next 150 years? To meet our climate goals and the vision of inclusivity that is essential for social justice and peace, transit and the city itself has to be for everyone. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Mary. Looking around, any questions? Seeing none, thanks so much, Mary.
You're welcome.
Up next, we'll call on Katie King. Hi, Katie, whenever you're ready.
I don't know. Okay. Hello, everyone. Today I'm here to talk about the cancellation of the Temporary Transit Fare Special Program, aka the Voluntary Pay Program, for CNIB card holders and people using personal mobility devices. This delegation is relative today because we wouldn't need to be having a conversation about front door loading if the voluntary pay program wasn't being cut. You cannot cut this program if we have not addressed accessibility issues in terms of front door loading. I feel like this is a basic step before cutting a program. Major issues must be worked out beforehand in order to end an old program and move forward with a new program. You haven't sorted out inaccessibility front door loading issues, and in fact, trying to talk through these issues now when we are 14 days away from the voluntary pay program ending is a very literal illustration that the needs of disabled people in this city is an afterthought. Moreover, I'm aware that the ACPD was consulted on the new fare assist program in May of 2023, and they raised concerns with staff about the inaccessibility of front door loading. However, that information was not in the final staff report. Instead, the relevant consultation only states that some members felt there would be a problem using Presto, which is not accurate. There is an accessibility problem using Presto. These kinds of consultations indicate, again, that the experiences and insight in lives of people living with disabilities is not taken seriously. It is not fair and it is not just. You must extend the temporary transit fare special program until you can figure out how to keep it permanent or come up with a new program that is the same. There must be no gap where there is a program like this that does not exist. Last week, HCBN and DJNO put out a survey to gauge how people will be impacted by the termination of these two programs, the Voluntary Pay Program and the Affordable Transit Pass Program. The majority of those who filled out the survey so far did not know that these programs were being terminated. I feel that when the termination of vital programs like these is done so quickly and quietly, it is an indication that it was not the right decision and was perhaps kept under wraps for a reason. The last thing I want to talk about is that the City of Hamilton's website says that Fare Assist is a more equitable discount program. I actually don't think this is true, because equity is a lot more nuanced than everyone getting the same access to something. Sometimes you need to expand the access for certain people who are more vulnerable or who historically have not gotten the same access. Sometimes you need to give different forms of access to different people. There's something called recognitional equity. The Office of Climate Change Initiatives defined recognitional equity in their May 23rd report about applying a climate justice lens to LRT. The Climate Change Office intends to use recognitional equity as a part of their understanding of equity to underpin their climate justice framework. Recognitional equity asks whose needs should be prioritized based on identification of groups or communities who are most vulnerable or historically ignored or underrepresented. The decision to cut the voluntary pay program is not actually equitable because it does not recognize and prioritize people with physical disabilities who are using a PMB or who have vision loss, who actually may require more access to something, in this case, mobility via the bus. The decision to cut the voluntary pay program does not align with the climate justice framework. Why come up with a climate justice framework if it won't be applied to something so central to climate justice like transit? A climate just, mobility just, and disability just future means we keep the voluntary pay program. Again, I'm asking that you extend the voluntary pay program and affordable transit pass until you can figure out how to keep them permanently or come up with new programs that are essentially the same, since I'm understanding that they're procedurally the reassessment is not viable. And that an issue cannot be reassessed. But I'm asking you to please have the humility to realize that the termination of this program is a mistake, and it's okay to admit that, and come up with a new way to offer this program for folks who need it most. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Katie. I don't see anyone on the speakers list for any questions. Thanks so much. Up next, we have Tim Nolan.
I'm Tim Nolan from the Accessibility Hamilton Alliance. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. In the mid-20th century, Tommy Douglas, already mentioned by a previous speaker, compelled governments to introduce programs that would help the government to help people who had no means of looking after themselves in many instances. Every one of you around this table today enjoys the opportunities of a universal health care system, a social security system for when you get older, an employment or an unemployment system, a Canada pension plan. These things are in place today because of the vision of a Tommy Douglas, who understood that there were many people who could not look after themselves because they did not have the means. The same holds true today for people with disabilities trying to make use of the HSR or even the paratransit system. The Fare Assist program was introduced presumably to provide a more equitable fare payment system for all people within the city. However, as I've pointed out in an email that each one of you would have received from me last evening, and I hope you've had the opportunity to read that, and if you haven't, I hope you will. But the Fair Assist requirements under the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, allows City Council, allows the HSR to offer a lower rate, a lower bus fare rate for persons with disabilities than what you would charge for other passengers. It's right in the legislation. I understand that it's going to be very difficult to reconsider a motion that was already reconsidered. There are some procedural challenges with trying to do that. However, you've already approved an opportunity that I think you can now move on today, and I certainly hope you will move on that today. And that is, in February of 2024, you approved staff report 2 PW 21056. And that staff report gives delegated authority to the general manager of Public Works to introduce short-term bus fare payment programs, special programs. The second thing is, when the Fair Assist program was introduced, the concept of temporary was stated, and that was that the 11 years or the 70 years or more in which people with disabilities didn't pay bus fare was now going to come to an end. The report that you approved, 21056, does not define short-term. So fundamentally, you've already defined short-term by allowing temporary programs to exist for at least 11 years, if not 70 or more. There are people with disabilities in this community who have never paid a bus fare and are going to have to do that now. I think by virtue of your own staff report that you've approved, you can do one of two things. You can either move today to have the general manager develop and establish a brand new Fair Assist program for people with disabilities living at or below the low income measure, which is roughly $28,000 for an individual or $57,000 for a family. You can do that today. Or you can create your own motion to create a brand new, what I call fair pay program for people with disabilities, so that those who live at or below the low income measure will not pay any bus fare whatsoever. So today is your opportunity to have your own Tommy Douglas, I'm not sure the right word. Today is your opportunity to do what Tommy Douglas has done. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions? Seeing none. Thanks, Tim. Oh, sorry, Tim, hold up. A last minute hand from Councillor McMeekin. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Mr. Chair, since Tommy was a friend of mine, I'm interested in the frequent references that were made. If Tommy were with us today, Tim, what would he suggest we do?
It's a great question. I did not know Tommy Douglas, but I would think that he would have considered what to do before the Fair Assist program was introduced.
Yeah.
And clearly that was not done. Despite what any staff report says, there was inadequate, insufficient, and incomplete consultation, and whatever level of consultation took place with the disability community, it was improperly conveyed to you around this table before you made your decision on the Fair Assist program. I would think that Tommy Douglas would have taken the time to understand the issue completely before any action was taken. And since that was not done in this case, then I would think it behooves you now to reconsider and rethink what you have done and to make a new motion, to create a new opportunity to either require the implementation of a new fair pay program for people with disabilities living at or below the low income measure, or you direct the general manager to do the same, and that be done and in place before July 1st. And if not before July 1st, then at the very least, a continuation of the temporary fair payment be extended until such time that there's a new, what I like to call fair pay program.
Councillor?
Yeah, thanks very much, Tim. I agree with you. He probably would have done, if nothing else, an excess of exploratory work before launching out on something this important. Previous speakers have referenced a number of folk with ability challenges not even being aware that this program has changed. Some have, one has suggested that maybe that was done deliberately. I don't agree with that, but notwithstanding, if we were to do a revisit consultation, what might that look like? How would you organize that consultation?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would put a pause on the implementation of Fair Assist as it applies to persons with disabilities. And I know that there's a whole procedural mechanism that you'd have to go through around that. But the second thing I would be doing is I'd be saying to staff, look, we want to do something for people with disabilities who cannot afford transit. They don't have the means. I mean, I know people in this community whose total income, annualized income, is $15,000 or less. I mean, many of you drive a vehicle, if not most of you or all of you will drive a vehicle that probably costs double or triple the $15,000 that somebody will earn in an entire year. People don't have the means. And so as a result of that, we have to stand up and look after those who don't have the ability to look after themselves. An appropriate consultation, there's a handful of organizations that are speaking to you today. We can consult them. We can do a proper consultation with the Advisory Committee for Persons with Disabilities. We can adequately go out and look at what's going on in other communities. I mean, in my email to you, I said, you know, even though our job around this table is not to consider what other communities are doing for their citizens with disabilities, but sometimes it's difficult to not look at other communities. I think the reporting so far has said to you, Hamilton is the only community that gives people fair, free transit. That's not true. I've given you a list of cities that have free transit programs for people with disabilities. London, Oakville, Mississauga, Toronto, Ottawa, and there are more. I know there are more. So, you know, I think we've got to do our homework, but in order for us to introduce a new program, if we're not going to do our homework, then let's move on the program. And if we're not going to move on the program, then let's put a pause on the existing program in some way. Find the way.
Councillor?
That's helpful. Thanks, Chair. Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Hold on, Tim. We have Councillor Crutch that has some questions. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming forward today, Tim. You made some interesting suggestions here in terms of motions we could put forward, and I think you recognize that there are two procedural wrinkles. Procedural wrinkle number one is reconsidering a reconsideration, and we can talk about that later and what that looks like. And I think you appreciate, as someone who's taken the time to write these things for many years, that it's probably unlikely to come up with a simple motion that just says, well, we're going to direct the general manager to do something and it's just going to happen by July 1st. So my question for you is around where you see a role for the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities in terms of them being able to put recommendations on the table, put things in writing about new programs like you're speaking about, or alternatives that would meet our procedural rules. Where do you see the possibility for that to happen? Because you're talking about very much about the advocacy of those roles, and as a former chair of an advisory committee, I can tell you that we put forward lots of recommendations to council in writing for them to consider. Do you see a role for ACPD in that?
Yes. I mean, like I was saying in response to Councillor McMeekin's last question, sure, there is a role, but the advisory committee is not the only body that represents the interests of people with disabilities. There are many, again, as I said, you know, speakers here today who represent people with disabilities. You know, some organizations have gone out and conducted some research. Do we need that? Like, you know, I'd like to think that I can speak for people with disabilities, but I'm but one and I don't represent everybody. But what I do represent is the idea, the interest of how the city needs to be more thoughtful and more progressive, well, I don't want to say progressive, thoughtful and mindful of how we're doing what we're doing and the impact upon people with disabilities. The advisory committee can be one part of that, but, and I appreciate, you know, it's not as simple as just waving a wand and saying, hey, you know, let's have a motion to direct the general manager. I think you've already given the general manager permission to create new programs. And I think it's easy enough to give a motion to simply say, we want a new program that deals with this matter, period. And we expect you to go out and do all the things you have to do in order to make that happen. And while that is going on, and I think, you know, you don't have to reconsider the motion, we're going to attach the extension of the Fair Assist program or the temporary, you know, pause program, whatever you call it. We're going to attach that to the new motion and by simply giving an extension. That way you don't have to reconsider anything. I believe that that's, you know, I'm sure somebody in clerks will probably tell me that I'm full of hooey on that one, but I think that's a way to deal with it.
I don't think they would ever say such a thing through the chair, Tim. I didn't think about who you are otherwise, but I take your point. I think that there is a space, as you're talking about, for groups, including ACPD, to come up with a proposal about something new. But I think what you're also asking is for there to be direction given under what's already been put on the table. So thanks very much for your delegation for being clear about that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And if I can say this, you know, and I appreciate that not all people with disabilities will agree on this, but not everybody with a disability, you know, not every person with a disability is absent of the means to help cover their cost of transit. But there is a significant enough population of people with disabilities, as I said earlier, you know, people who live with an income of $15,000 per year, they can't afford the transit. They can't afford to pay the cost of getting a bus to go to a doctor's appointment or to go out and get groceries or whatever it is they need to do. And I think those are the people who we really, truly need to look after first. That's what a caring community would do, and I'm sure that's what Tommy Douglas would have done.
Thanks, Tim. At this time, I don't see, are you, sorry, Councilor, you're done? Perfect. Thanks for your delegation, Tim.
Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Up next, we have Brad Evoy. I hope I said that right. If I didn't, I apologize. Whenever you're ready, Brad, go ahead.
Hello, folks. I'm Brad Evoy. It's wonderful to be here. My first delegation here to one of your committees. I look forward to doing many of these in future. But as mentioned by many of my colleagues here today, a number of us have been here to speak about the developments around Fair Assist and some of our deep, unsettling concerns with the Fair Assist program as it currently stands. Now, I'm not going to reiterate a whole lot that others have said so far, and hopefully we'll try to summarize and wrap up some things. But I think what's certainly clear at this time is that we are on the eve of the largest fare increase for disabled people in HSR's recent memory, which honestly is a somber way to begin and to celebrate the service's 150th year for a city with the highest density of people with disabilities in the province. We know that this change is either a 20% increase for the lesser used reduced fare program or a 100% increase for the much more highly used voluntary pay program. A fare discount which can have issues if one uses regional transit or other nearby services, as mentioned in the FAQs on your website. A fare discount that rests solely on inaccessible fare boxes and devices through Presto, as others have described today. A fare discount which doesn't apply to all forms of fare, single use and passes, unlike other jurisdictions like Toronto, which cover both. Now, we know from attending committees and speaking to community that City Hall does have the money to continue the existing programs, at least for a period. But instead, this fare increase has moved forward, even while, as Katie has mentioned, we have spoken to many and surveyed many who are unaware of these changes, in spite of advertising efforts. And we know, too, that this change has created further issues and problems that will need to be resolved. Hamilton's rolling stock of transit vehicles have clear limitations for front door boarding. But the offloading of fare enforcement to drivers that makes this change necessary is clearly done in the eyes of those who would turn drivers into fare inspectors. You know, and when we look, because folks had mentioned earlier, what would someone coming through Hamilton from Toronto think about this system, having experienced, say, equivalents of the TTC? So that's me. And I can tell you quite plainly that the design of the HSR bus, as others have mentioned, is very clearly designed for backdoor boarding. And compared to the TTC, to GO, to other transit systems, the East Presto, it's very clearly limited and ultimately clearly designed to put the burden of fare inspection on your drivers and to create an ostracizing scenario for disabled people. So, for us, while we are advocates for universal, non-means tested, free transit for all, which is really the only accessible way to have transit, true accessible transit, DJNO supports community calls for either a continuation of existing programs parallel to Fare Assist, or to establish a new fair play, fair pay system where low-income Hamiltonians, including those on OW and ODSP, can use the service for a 0% fare, as outlined by Tim. Transit drivers shouldn't have to be fare cops. Disabled riders shouldn't be ostracized for wanting to be free to get where they need to be. And that's where we're heading right now. We want the City of Hamilton to be a partner for the movement of accessible, environmentally friendly, active transportation. That's a choice you can make here today and through other means, as mentioned by others. But know that this doesn't end here today. We can see patterns of province-wide changes to transit access for disabled people. And we know that to achieve our goals, we need to take the fight to Metrolinx and the Ford government. So, will Hamilton be an ally in that fight? That's up to you. But either way, as others have mentioned, you need to decide what transit looks like in Hamilton for the next 150 years, and ultimately, who it's for. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Don't go anywhere yet. We have Councillor Alex Wilson that'd like to ask some questions. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. First off, congrats on the new role. Excited to have you in Hamilton. I just wanted to ask about the survey that yourself and I believe it was Delegate King mentioned. Are you able to share some summary data or follow up with some of what you heard in that survey? Yeah, just broadly, I think, as mentioned earlier, the majority so far, we're pretty early days, are unaware of the change. It's very clear. It's not, I would say it's 60-40, which is still concerning. I think that, overall, the comments we've received from everyone who's filled out the survey speaks towards concerns about accessibility of the overall transit system, and in particular, a desired move towards free fare for disabled folks. It is a universal shared opinion amongst all our respondents. And I think that, the system that was proposed by Tim meets that, at least for some. Ultimately, I think, as I said in my little spiel, the true way towards true way to accessible transit is universal freedom of access for all Hamiltonians.
But that being said, in the moment, for where we are, that is at least the two very clear points that I can come forward with from the survey, and we'll be happy to share more when that develops.
Councillor?
Thank you. And through you, Chair, so it's just to maybe restate, because there's a couple of things happening here. Folks with disabilities don't all get the pass right now, but two classes of people. I think that was part of the concern with the program, was moving towards more of a universal system. In that, some folks getting 100% discount, now not getting it. It's as you mentioned, the largest fare increase there. In a new system that delegates have talked about, that how do you address that? Is it keeping the low income cutoff that is in the current program that is means tested, and you shared kind of the long-term vision of that, but in the short term, keeping the current mean tested LIC cutoff, but adding an additional disability screen that's not specific to certain classes or conditions of experience, or what does that look like if there's a step 2 that gets to 100%?
Yeah, I think when I think about that, I think about, I think the system that Tim has proposed in terms of following through on the limb as a basis of that is a good starting point for us. I think that, ultimately, like you say, moving away from a means tested towards a universal system is ultimately the goal. But I do think, as mentioned, the folks involved in management do have the ability to propose programs and make amendments and changes to them. So hopefully we would be able to co-develop with consultation with community, ourselves, and other disability organizations in the city, but also with general community members through consultation, ways in which to move forward on that. I think that, the loss of the voluntary pay program as is isn't really about equity or about equity to access, because in the end, the change to the program as is really only excludes. And I think that if folks had wanted to make a change, they could implement something like, Fare Assist with a 0% fare, and that would be equivalent to what folks receive on the voluntary pay program. But at this point, I think that, at the very least, moving forward with Fare Assist with a 0% fare or something similar would be a good starting point.
Councillor?
Thank you. If I could just ask a clarifying question, because I think this is the crux of the conversation. The numbers that we were shared, and again, we'll get a report back, not for July 1st, but we'll get a report back confirming some of those estimates potentially, but was about a third of existing ridership, regardless of disability or ability status, meets that LIM. And so using the LIM hits maybe about a third of the ridership, gets them that 30% discount. Are you, again, just trying to understand the ask, is the ask to keep that eligibility, keep that about the third of the ridership and move that from 30% to 100%? Or is the ask, as I understood it earlier, to add in a second, like not just a means as in financial, but add a means plus a disability, and then if you clear both tests, then there's 100% for that subset of folks within the LIM. Just trying to understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, for the immediate ask, I think the immediate ask is to, allow folks that meet that LIM threshold to access a 0% fare. I think that following that, a reassessment of access in general towards a 0% fare for all persons with disabilities and following that kind of screen would be really necessary. And I think that that's, an equitable way moving forward.
All right, thank you again, and congratulations on the new role and being part of our community. Excited for more delegations from you in the future. Thanks, Brad.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Brad. That's it for questions. Clerk, just to confirm, the last delegation was withdrawn?
That's correct.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder to accept all the delegations, please. Councillor Crutch, Councillor Alex Wilson. Sorry, any questions? Councillor Danko?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just before we receive the delegations, there's numerous references to our staff acting deliberately or inappropriately. And I think it's important, we're trying to give as much latitude to the delegates as possible, but our staff are put in a position where they are not don't have an ability to respond. So just before we receive the delegations, I don't know if there's anything our staff would like to address with some of the comments that were made.
Director?
Through the chair. Thank you, Councillor Danko, for that opportunity. I want to start by acknowledging that this is a really difficult topic of conversation. And we recognize that the programmatic changes that we brought forward as staff were going to have a personal impact on some individuals. And it was a best effort to develop a program that would help as many Hamiltonians as possible. And I want to take us back to when we first brought this to council to Public Works on the 3rd of April 2023, as memory recalls, and we indicated that we were going to develop an affordable fare program. It was in its infancy. We had begun doing significant outreach to other transit agencies, other municipal properties, environmental scans of what was out there. This wasn't something that we dreamed up without research. It was thought through and carefully presented. When we came back to Public Works in May, we indicated we were using the Engage Hamilton platform to launch a survey. We received more than 1,000 responses on that survey. I believe up until that time, that was the most responded survey that the City of Hamilton had had. We met with CNIB and with our ACPD. We did a variety of different outreach. We continue to do so. And then when we were back in front of the group in December, at that time, there was a motion requesting a 6-month reprieve and extension of a grace period before we cut over to the new program. And we happily supported that. We did more than 20 outreach events across the city, focusing our efforts in the downtown core, continued an aggressive advertising campaign using digital media. We've handed out pamphlets at various community organizations, tax clinics, resource centers, etc. We have done on-street or as requested front door entry support for persons with mobility devices, and we did a direct mail campaign to more than 4,600 accessible transportation services clients. So we do feel that we certainly put forth a best effort at a comprehensive and robust research program. I acknowledge we have heard the concerns. I met with the chair of ACPD and 2 members of my management team just a month or so ago. We acknowledge that there is a lack of full appreciation of the Presto product. A gentle reminder that we use it because we have to. It is a part of our gas tax funding from the province. There are approximately 11 agencies, 30 million riders per day are using Presto throughout the province of Ontario. It may not be perfect, but it is the system that we have. We were able to provide contact persons to the chair of ACPD with the accessibility branch of Presto so that they can outreach and raise some of their concerns directly with the product owner. And we understand that the change from a rear door boarding to the front door boarding is a bit of a change, but from speaking to our drivers and our on-road staff, rear door boarding is a very, very small challenge that we face on our system every day. We're talking perhaps maybe less than 5 people per day may want to rear door board. And when and where possible, the operators will still make that available if that is somebody's preference. And so we have done what we feel through our operations staff and our training, work with our operators to prepare them for the changes, lots of operational notices. So we understand that it's not a perfect program. We indicated that when we brought the pilot forward, that we would reevaluate, that we might come up with different recommendations. We've got surveys out there live in the public domain right now, so that when we come back to you in September, we have some early indicators of program success, program areas of opportunities. And the thing about a pilot, it does allow you to react in real time. We don't have to wait for the end of the 30 months to make changes if there are some. In the intermission, we are happy to continue dialogues with our ACPD and other members of our community who might like to see program changes. Sorry, that was really long-winded. That was not a short answer. I'm not great at that, and I apologize. So that's staff's brief overview. Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you.
You're good. Thank you, Director. I have Councillor Crutch and Councillor McMeekin on the speakers list. Councillor, go ahead.
Thanks. I think it's helpful. We talked, I did anyways, and delegates mentioned this, reconsidering a reconsideration. And I really don't think everyone here knows what on earth we're all talking about if they weren't part of those conversations. I thought it'd be helpful for the clerk just to review briefly what it is that the procedural or legislative challenge in front of us is in terms of making changes to this, so everyone's just aware what that is and what people we're actually speaking to.
Clerk.
So if you were to, because council already made a decision on the issue, and council already reconsidered, they already amended the report that you already decided, you would have to waive the rules, suspend the rules of procedure to reconsider this issue. And you can't do it at committee, it would have to be done at council.
Councillor.
Thank you. And through the chair, just to fill that one bit of a blank in there, what you were saying, I think, and if I understand you correctly, is it's not within the procedural rules of order to reconsider something more than one time in a term of council. So you can have a report come forward, you can then reconsider that report, but you're not permitted to reconsider it again. In order to do so, you'd have to waive the entire procedural bylaw and all of our rules of order to sort of supersede that, and would require a 2/3 majority. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Thanks. I just wanted that on the record in like the clearest terms possible so everybody understood what it was instead of referring to in passing. I have one question for Director Cousin-Heath, and there's been some discussions today about new programs or new ideas and things like that, and you referred to that in your comments just a moment ago about the fact that, you know, you've got the authority to do that, perhaps bring forward programs. Within Fair Assist, maybe there's other things that can be done to address the issues people have come forward with. I suggested maybe groups need to come together, maybe ACPD, get some language in writing and propose something. I'm just wondering if like that's the process. What does the process look like for that if groups want to come forward with a proposal for a new program?
Director.
Through the chair. I believe procedurally, I'll look to Elsie McIntosh to correct me if I stray too far. I think if ACPD was wanting to make recommendations that they would submit it through council.
So ACPD reports to the General Issues Committee. They would do it through a General Issues Committee and then, yes, to council.
Thank you.
Thanks. I recognize what I'm about to say is not going to satisfy anybody, but I'm going to say it. I think there is an opportunity based on the delegations we saw today and interest from folks in disability spaces to come up with something else. And the advisory committee, now called the Accessibility Committee for Persons with Disabilities, is there as council's conduit for some of those things. And so I bet, and Councillor Chaddison isn't here as the rep for ACP to speak to that, but I bet that would be a reasonable conduit from which to bring some language forward, make a recommendation, and have a discussion about that. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McMeekin.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with Councillor Crutch around trying to find some creative ways to lift up some additional information and idea gathering. That's why I asked Mr. Nolan about what he thought Tommy Douglas might do in terms of consultation. I think Councillor, he virtually suggested what you just suggested, and that I think is helpful. 2 points I want to raise with the Director, Cousin-Heath. One is there's a reference to not a lot of people want to use a rear bus entrance. It's about, if I heard you correctly, maybe 5 per day. How does that work? Do you go to the front door and say to the driver, I need to use the back door entrance? Is that how it works?
Director.
Through the chair. Typically, if people wanted to board by that back door, they would indicate to the driver, or they would be positioned kind of nearer to the back door. It's really related to the onboard configuration of where the wheelchair accessible spots are. The front door is of course accessible for wheelchairs of regular normal size, same as the back door. So they can indicate to the driver where they want to board and then do so.
We did hear that there were some claims from people who more at the front door, the difficulties running over the feet of other passengers. And from that, I think they pushed into the advantages of rear door. As long as that option is available and it's easy to do, you wouldn't want someone standing, I wouldn't want somebody standing at the back door and the driver missing that opportunity to allow one of those 5 people not to access. That's the first point, and thank you, Director, for that. The other point is just to raise an issue about the reference to Tommy Douglas. I did know the man. We were engaged in a lot of on-campus stuff years ago. I had a chance to get to know him a bit. And one of the things that he said to me that's always stuck in my mind was that he never proposed a program, including Medicare, where the cost of that program wasn't passed on to the users. When the Medicare plan, there was a special head tax that was brought in. There was a new, there was a percentage raise in the income tax and some other things. So that's not to say that the municipalities, those that are offering free fare for designated vulnerable groups, don't cover that. But I just want to make it clear to anybody who thinks there's a magic wand out there to wave. It's not necessarily helpful or unhelpful. It's just the reality is you got to pay for it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Up next, Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I know we're a little bit unconventional doing questions to staff on delegations, so appreciate that. Just wondering, a couple of quick questions about, in the original program, there was a budget for that program. Have assumptions been met in regard to Fair Assist sign up? Is there has the budget been fulfilled up to this point? Thoughts about that? And then do we have a sense of what the impact of the 6-month extension to voluntary pay has been, understanding that that's a data-free program, so it's largely anecdotal there, but just wondering about the has the math lined up with assumptions? Thank you.
Through the chair. It's early days and we're still receiving applications. We receive approximately 30 to 40 per day. We had anticipated approximately around 88,000 Hamiltonians would qualify for the program. We don't have that many applicants. We wouldn't have had the capacity to take that many if they had all appeared in January. And we had talked about that a little bit at the beginning as well. So at this point in time, we continue to take applications on an ongoing basis.
Councillor?
And sorry, knowing that it's not 88,000, understanding the numbers in Flex, is it possible to just get in this back of the napkin where roughly might that be? Again, I am not expecting, it's moving every day, it sounds like, so just what best guess would be?
Through the chair, I don't have those numbers with me today.
Okay, that's okay, thank you.
Councillor Tattison?
Hi, yes, I'd like to just ask something to staff about what Delegate Nolan said in terms of the general manager actually having the authority to set temporary fare programs. And I'd like the general manager to make a comment and please explain or set the record straight, please.
GM?
So through the chair, staff would bring forward programs that would incentivize or increase ridership. They would bring that forward through a process that they have. Typically, we've seen fare reductions for students. We've seen programs that are implemented in the summer where we see increase in traffic. Maybe I'll ask Maureen to add on to that.
Certainly, through the chair. Typically, the delegated authority for the general manager has been used for very specific, targeted, short-term, quick promotions designed to stimulate ridership coming out of COVID. So that is how it's been used traditionally. We've also used it to support the 150th anniversary celebrations for $1.50 fare days, summer youth promotions, and those types of things, not as a mechanism to supplement or augment a program that was temporary.
Councillor Tattison?
Okay, so it hasn't been used as a mechanism for augmenting a program that was temporary, but could it be used for that?
Through the chair, I would want to seek out advice and direction from the clerk and possibly legal services on the whether or not we could do something with delegated authority under that context.
Right, and I guess what I'm
Counselor,
suggesting then is like, not something for the long term, but, something to get us to that point where there is where the report comes back. Would there be enough funding left because we haven't, met the 88,000 supported people that could have come? Is there enough to cover us for a few months?
Counselor, just before we answer that, GM Kane wanted to follow up the comment from the director in regards to coming back with legal advice. GM?
Yep, through the chair to the councillor, a lot of times when these promotions come up, they're really to enhance ridership at the end of the day and promote the HSR, which we actively do. Any program changes I would want to bring forward because it's a different authority that I would have through the budget process, and even before that, we would bring forward a report and refer it to the budget cycle. So as you can appreciate, there's this competing demand for dollars, and ultimately we have to make sure that we are covering the full spectrum of services and that we're allocating funds and resources appropriately. So I wouldn't want to make an ad hoc decision or recommendation without doing the proper homework and necessary studies to support that.
Counselor?
In saying that, I'm just saying that, there is potential there. And just because something wasn't used in a way, it's not that we can't use it in that way in the future. And that the dollars could possibly be there because we fully haven't used all the dollars that were set aside for this, is what I'm understanding. Is that correct?
Counselor, just before we keep going, I'll let them answer. I would just say, if we're going to look at trying to do something, I think we're going to take it away from this part of the meeting and move it to a part where you can take it offline. I'll let the GM answer that question. Then again, if there's members of the committee that want to try and set up a plan or put something together, let's do that offline so we can accept our delegations. GM?
And through the chair, that's exactly, we would have to do the necessary review analysis and see what is feasible and what is not feasible. Thank you.
Counselor?
No more questions. Thank you for your guidance.
Thank you. No one else on the speaker list. I believe we had a mover and seconder, so we'll go to the vote to accept the delegations. And that carries 11-0. Thank you to all the delegates and committee members. We're going to move on to staff presentations, 8.1, and I will call on Director Nick Winters to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Nick Winters, Director of the Hamilton Water Division. So I'm happy to say that we're bringing a very critical report and presentation in front of Public Works Committee today for consideration. Just under 2 years ago, we presented a project concept to Public Works Committee of the day for the work that's required at the city's Woodward Water Treatment Plant, which I will continue to characterize as the most critical asset that this city owns. From my somewhat biased perspective, but there's not a lot that would happen in the city without that asset being in a state of good repair and able to deliver the services to this community. We did, through the subsequent budget processes in both 2023 and into 2024, provide some update on where we're going with this. And we have Manager Stuart Leach, who's going to provide a presentation today on the work that's been done. And really, without stealing too much of Stuart's thunder, we wanted to make sure that we did all of our homework in how we could deliver the work that's needed at that facility, and then also what's going to be required in order to successfully deliver that critical project for the city of Hamilton. So that's what you'll see today is Stuart will review the plan for that project, as well as the recommendations that are in the report that accompanies his presentation. I will mention that the recommendations for the report are to build a project team with new resources within Hamilton Water to deliver that project. And we did mention, as part of the 2024 rate budget process, that we'd be bringing this report in year for council's awareness at that point in time. Just very quickly, I just want to thank Stuart and his team for their work on this assignment, as well as a lot more. Stuart doesn't get the opportunity to make in front of committee very often, but it's he and his teams that are very regularly upgrading our vertical infrastructure across our water, wastewater, stormwater systems, so our pumping stations and reservoirs and things like that are out in their system. He really does an excellent job leading that group. We're lucky to have him, and looking forward to what he's got for us this afternoon. Thank you.
Manager Leach, welcome. You don't get to do this often. He just pumped you up, so this better be a top-notch presentation.
I better nail it. Thanks, Nick. Good afternoon, councillors. My name, as Nick pointed out, is Stuart Leach, and I'm the manager of the Capital Delivery section in Hamilton Water. I'm pleased to be here today to present committee a summary of Report 22078A regarding the Woodward Water Treatment Plant Phase 2 upgrades. The purpose of this presentation will be to provide council with a follow-up to the Woodward Water Treatment Plant Information Report that was sent back in September 2022. This information report identified that staff would report back to council with the findings and recommendations from a recently completed third-party review assignment. As a summary, this report 22078A recommends that 4 new permanent full-time staff be approved to support the Phase 2 upgrades capital team, funded from the Water, Wastewater, Stormwater Rate Budget Capital Program. Also included in the recommendations are 3 new permanent full-time staff that be referred to the upcoming 2025 Water, Wastewater, Stormwater Rate Budget to provide operational and maintenance support for the Phase 2 upgrades and other large capital upgrades occurring at the city's 2 wastewater facilities. The upcoming slides that I'll present will provide a background and focus on these recommendations. Just a little bit of brief summary of the Woodward Water Treatment Plant historical background. The water plant services roughly 570,000 people within the city's greater urban area. The existing plant was originally constructed in the 30s and expanded in the late 50s, and on average day produces about 200 million liters of water, safe, clean drinking water. Various improvements have been made over the decades, including in 2011, a major architectural structural upgrade and a recently completed $25 million Phase 1 upgrade, which leads into Phase 2 capital upgrades, the focus of today's presentation. The studies noted here are key reports that provided a roadmap for the Phase 1 upgrades, which is now completed, and the proposed Phase 2 capital upgrades. In 2016, Hamilton Water completed a best available technologies and feasibility study that assessed process capacity bottlenecks and suitable treatment technologies. And secondly, in 2022, Hamilton Water completed a conceptual design that is the basis of the capital scope for the Phase 2 upgrades. In 2023, Hamilton Water completed a third-party review assignment that provided recommendations for key areas that are deemed critical to the success of the Phase 2 upgrades. The focus of the review assignment was to assess the capital approach proposed in the Phase 2 conceptual design report, completed in 2022. This slide is a summary of the findings from that review assignment, starting with staffing resourcing. Dedicated city staff resources are essential for the delivery of the Phase 2 upgrades, including support of successful project management, design, and construction administration. These resources include positions to create and staff a capital project team, along with operations and maintenance support positions that will provide critical support throughout all of the projects in the capital program. Then there's process risk during construction. Risks associated with the process upgrades were reviewed, and technologies identified were assessed for suitability to ensure the objectives would be met for the Phase 2 upgrades. In addition, the proposed construction staging, overall schedule, and potential impact to the water treatment plant operations during the course of construction were reviewed with respect to maintaining water production and treatment objectives. The constructability and construction sequencing was considered, and risks were identified and accounted for in the project planning. The review assignment concluded that construction activity is suitable for the water treatment plant facility and site. Construction phasing. The review considered whether certain portions of the work could be pushed to a future phase in order to defer capital expenditures. The review assignment concluded that the Phase 2 capital program should be split into distinct capital phases, 2A and 2B. This phasing strategy will prioritize 2A activities to focus on upgrades that target public health benefits, and a separate Phase 2B will focus on capacity for growth. And finally, the capital construction cost estimate. Following the recommendation that the contract be split into 2 distinct phases, the review found the capital cost and schedule breakdown to be appropriate, which this is a slide that summarizes both the costing and schedules for both phases. Contract 2A is estimated to have a capital cost of $335 million, with design and construction from 2025 through 2032. And Contract 2B is estimated to have a capital cost of $208 million, with design and construction from 2029 through 2035. The proposed 4 new permanent full-time staff within Hamilton Water to support the Phase 2 upgrades do not require any additional budget approvals, as the positions will be funded from the Water, Wastewater, and Stormwater Rate Capital Program at an approximate annual cost of $622,000. Currently, Hamilton Water does not have dedicated resources for the delivery of large capital program at the Woodward Water Treatment Plant. The proposed new staff will consist of the following. The manager will oversee overall project management of the Phase 2A and 2B upgrades. The manager will also be responsible for overall capital programming and staffing, sponsorship oversight for the senior project manager, led capital projects within the program. The senior project manager will provide oversight for the investigative design, construction, commissioning, warranty services, including the filter building components, which I'll get into later, within 2 phases, A and B. This position will require the qualifications and experience to project manage complex, large capital projects. The senior project manager will also be responsible for sponsorship oversight for the project manager position and the projects led by them. The project manager will provide oversight for the investigative design, construction, commissioning, warranty services as well, including the chlorine building components within phases 2A and B. And finally, the engineering technologist will address a number of day-to-day requests received. This position is also important to provide project and program support, maintain a document management system, provide project controls for the various capital projects within the program. Currently, Hamilton Water does not have dedicated resources for the operational and maintenance support for the large capital program at the water treatment plant. As such, 3 permanent full-time equivalents are recommended to be referred to the upcoming 2025 water, wastewater, storm rate budget, as I mentioned earlier, to provide this support. These positions will also support the Woodward Wastewater Treatment Plant expansion project and the Dundas Wastewater Treatment Plant upgrades. The table on this slide provides an overview of the proposed new staff, including a treatment plant senior process engineer, that will provide regulatory process operational requirements to the engineering design teams during design, construction training, all the different periods of a project. The SCADA project manager will play a crucial role in overseeing and supporting automation and SCADA-related tasks throughout the life cycle of the project, including design, construction, training, and commissioning phases. And finally, the maintenance supervisor, will offer technical and field support in mechanical, electrical, instrumentation aspects throughout the project life cycle. This role will serve as a primary representative of plant maintenance throughout the design, construction, training, commissioning, and warranty phases. This slide is an overview of what we were proposing to scope within phases 2A and 2B upgrades at the plant. The existing treatment process, I'll start with that, is a conventional treatment plant that includes intake chlorination, screening, pre-chlorination, coagulation, flocculation, conventional sedimentation, granular activated carbon filters, followed by fluoridation and corrosion control. The box colors represent each phase of the upgrades, starting with phase 2A in the blue, the filter building, which is the building in the middle. I'll try to point to it. Right there. The nervous, a new filter to waste system, which the plant currently does not have. A new system will allow for filter ripening after backwash cleaning, prior to finished water production. This process will mitigate water quality challenges after a backwash cycle and will address Ministry of Environment concerns. And within that same building, filter under drains will be replaced in 22 of 24 filters, including filter media. The upgrades will ensure reliable filtration redundancy and capacity is maintained. And over to the chlorine disinfection building. You can see it up in the top corner there. Right there. This is required to replace the existing age chlorine facility as well as ensure security of supply with the demands of both the water and wastewater facilities. The new building will incorporate the ability to use alternate chlorine supply strategies, which provides flexibility and redundancy for this very critical process. Next is the new filter backwash and UV disinfection building, right below that. And this will house the filter backwash pumping system that will use non-chlorinated treated water to clean the filters, which will prolong the service life of the filter media and reduce replacement frequency. And ultraviolet UV disinfection, adding post-filtration UV will address Ministry of Environment concerns regarding disinfection credits. It will reduce the quantity of chlorine needed for disinfection and address concerns over degradation of process equipment and filter media due to the current practice of pre-treatment with chlorine, more relevant with corrosion potential, corrosive potential, on equipment. In addition, UV will provide an extra barrier against pathogens. And finally, some ancillary works, including clearable tank concrete restoration, electrical SCADA and HVAC scope to support the process upgrades. So now the separate phase 2B upgrades in red include the following. It's not shown on the screen. The Lula pumping station may require some upgrades depending on the hydraulic requirements of the new pretreatment sedimentation process. The new pretreatment sedimentation process is proposed to be a high-rate clarification technology housed in a new building structure atop the existing sedimentation tanks, which is over here. This will help mitigate capacity bottlenecks that we're experiencing currently and also improve filter performance, the downstream process. Along with the responsibilities of delivering phases 2A and B, the plant has other additional active and future capital projects that would be captured within the water treatment plant capital program. The water treatment plant site currently has approximately 11 additional active capital projects and studies covering immediate needs capital improvements, preliminary engineering studies, and asset condition assessments of the facility for long-term needs projections. The approved budgets for the current active projects at the water plant total approximately $20 million. Currently, our challenge is not having a dedicated team to deliver large capital at the water treatment plant. The rationale for the proposed new staff considered the following. The staffing request, supported by the third-party review assignment, will ensure that Hamilton Water has the required staff resources to successfully design, construct, and commission an extremely complex capital rehabilitation and upgrade program while maintaining an operational plant at the city's most critical water facility. Secondly, the third-party assignment reviewed the resources structure for the design and construction of major treatment plants and rehabilitation programs with other large municipalities in Canada. This provided insight to how other municipalities have structured their teams for major complex capital works. The proposed resources structure for the water plant phases 2A and B will significantly minimize risks, including schedule and budget variances for the program, which has project timelines estimated to carry through 2035 for design and construction. And finally, along with the responsibilities of 2A and B, as I mentioned in the previous slides, the plan has other active and future capital projects that will be captured within this team. And finally, this slide is the overall summary of Hamilton Water's proposed new permanent full-time staff recommended to deliver the city's Woodward Water Treatment Plant capital program. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for your presentation, Manager Leach. Before we get into discussion, a movement or a seconder? Councillor Alex Wilson, Councillor Kassar, any discussion on the presentation? Yeah? Councillor Wilson, I don't see anybody on the list, so that's why I'm asking. Councillor Alex Wilson, Councillor Wang? All right, let's do it. On the presentation, please.
Thank you. Apologies. My little microphone's on eScribe, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but all good.
I think it was my fault, but
no, it's all okay.
You're good now.
Thanks. And through you, Chair, just one quick question. I'm just trying to compare to the capital, the multi-year budgeted forecast in our capital budget. I'm not seeing any big differences. Like, it's roughly the same summary number, about 2 million off for phase 1 and phase 2, but like in the context of hundreds of millions of dollars, it's the same number essentially. Is that true? Have there been changes kind of over this past 6 months of working with the plan? It's still staying within the multi-year budget expectations. It seems like to me at a glance, just wondering if that is the case.
Nick, would you rather respond to that? Basically, the budget that was put in the rate budget in the 2024 rate budget is essentially the same as what we're presenting today. That is a multi-year cash flowed budget.
Thank you. That was just seeking confirmation that nothing has really kind of changed since we approved these numbers in the budget process, and this is and continue to be what we expect, but just getting back what this looks like and kind of some of the exciting operating pieces or what it's going to achieve, but the numbers haven't really shifted. So thank you for confirming that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wang?
Actually, Councillor Alex Wilson asked exactly what I was going to ask.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Councillor McMeekin, did Councillor Wilson cover your question?
He did, actually. I was
Oh,
gonna
perfect. Okay. No.
Say what Tammy said. Thanks. Good question, Alex.
Oh, you're being serious. Okay. Anybody else? Or does everybody else get covered off already? Perfect. We're going to receive the presentation by a vote. Thank you, Manager.
Thank you.
Councillor Francis, are you able to vote? Councillor Cratch?
Thank you, and that carries 10-0. Now on to the report. May I please have a mover and seconder? Councillor Alex Wilson, Councillor Wang. Any discussion? I'll give you guys a few seconds. If your mics aren't working, just put up your hands. Any discussion? We'll start with Councillor McMeekin.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. You know, to Nick and the team. You know how important most of us, including myself, believe our water system to be. And the presentation in the previous fiscal year reflected that almost unanimous sharing of feelings. You know, you don't have to go far to see the importance of a strong functioning water system. You just have to look to Calgary, which with its struggles. I'm familiar personally with Phoenix, Arizona, and some of the things that are going on there. It may be a stretch, but even the lead in the water here in Hamilton. So my question would be, with that a little bit of a preamble, I've had some constituents calling about what's happening on the lead in the water issue. I'm not sure we're directly connected. That may just be an internal kind of building problem, but just while we're on water, why don't we get a quick perceptive update on that from
Director Winters, a quick one. We want to make sure we stay on the presentation, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Through the chair, it's Councillor McMeekin's question. So I can tell you that the city does not have any lead pipes remaining in our distribution system. The real challenge with lead in our community is with the lead that exists on water service pipes or within pipes within residential institutional buildings from the time that they were constructed, including lead solder. And so the City of Hamilton, Stuart mentioned it during his presentation, but we commissioned a corrosion control facility at the Woodward Water Treatment Plant in 2018, began adding orthophosphate to the water as an inhibitor, a corrosion inhibitor across our entire system that has an impact both on lead but on other metals as well. And we've seen that to be very effective based on the results that we track, the areas that we sample at reducing lead exposure across the community, both as a result of those sources of lead that I already mentioned.
That's thank you. That's a very critical, given the health risks that 100 times the normal acceptable levels poses for some of our kids, particularly in schools and childcare centers.
Thank you, Councillor McMeekin. Up next, Councillor Kassar.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No questions. The report was very clear, very supportive. I just wanted to express my support. And I know that there's often criticism when staff are asking to add heads. But I mean, this is hundreds of millions of dollars of capital project. We don't have a capital project team. As Director Winter says, this is an incredibly important asset over a decade or more. So just very supportive, very thorough, and just want to thank staff for putting this together and the work that's to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see anyone else on the list, so what we're approving today, 4 positions that are going to be no money being asked for, and then the additional positions that are being deferred to the 2025 budget. Okay, no more questions, we're good? Let's go to the vote. And that carries 11-0. Thank you. Moving on to consent items. 9.1, 2023 year-end report on community bookings at Tim Hortons Field, PW 18075C in Ward 3. I don't see the director, so I don't know who to introduce, but we'll, acting director, or is it Rob Gatto? I don't know who's introducing the report. So, because Indra is not up there, so whoever's taking Indra's spot, please.
Through the chair and members of council, Rob Gatto, manager of sports and entertainment facilities.
Do you have anything to add, Rob?
No, other than that it was a successful year in 2023, we've seen a 39% increase in community usage of 1,200 hours, which is 39%. Is there any questions from council with the report?
We'll get a mover and second, and we do have one councillor already on the list. So Councillor Beatty, will you move that? Councillor Kassar will second, and Councillor Beatty, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Hi for the third time, Rob. Nice to see you again. Quick question that came up at the HWDSB Liaison Committee with regards to the use of Tim Hortons fields for school board related times, particularly with Bernie Custis across the street. The concern was raised that there's some difficulty, I'll say, in terms of making the field accessible during some times. I'm just wondering if that percolated its way up to you, the concern from the liaison committee, if you had any quick response, or if there's something coming forward perhaps back to the liaison committee in a future report.
Through the chair and Councillor Beatty. So we have a facility booking coordinator, and we work closely with the athletic director with the school board. So the challenge with the school board, what I see is we have contractual obligations with our two tenants, the Tiger Cats and the Hamilton Forge soccer clubs. So it's difficult for them, and the challenge is, I really think they want to come over when it's phys ed time, right? So, you know, if it's between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., they wouldn't be able to get onto the pitch due to the Hamilton soccer team practices from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. And now Ticat season, they're on the pitch from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. We do offer the school board times between 7:30 a.m. and 8:30 Monday to Friday, and from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. through the week, Monday to Friday, and then obviously weekends, right? No one's in school.
Thank you, Rob, for the answer. And any creative workarounds, I'm sure, would always be welcomed by the athletic community over at Bernie Custis. And no further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no more speakers on the list, we'll move to the vote. And that carries 10-0. Moving on to 9.2, Waste Management Subcommittee Report 24-002, May 30th, 2024. May I please have a mover and second to receive the report? Councillor Alex Wilson, Councillor Wang, any discussion on the report? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote, please. That carries 10-0. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. 11.1, Housing Enabling Water Systems Fund, PW 24038. Director Winters, please introduce your report.
Thank you, Chair. So the report that's in front of committee for consideration today, it does advise committee of the projects that the city has submitted under this funding program through an application to the province back in April. The recommendations will provide the mayor and city clerk the ability to sign any inevitable agreements should we have positive news about the status of that application. And it does mention in there as well that, you know, we are hopeful for positive news, and when we get that news, we will communicate that back through to council via communications update.
Thank you, Director. Mover and seconder, Councillor Crutch, Councillor Maureen Wilson. Councillor Crutch, go ahead, please.
Thanks for this report, which, as you note in its writing, impacts wards 1 and 2. Specifically, it impacts the changes to construction happening along York Boulevard and along Cannon Street in terms of upgrades to the water infrastructure. What's the risk to that project if the funding isn't approved? Because you used some tentative language when you described this, saying, you know, you're hopeful and it looks like the money is coming. Could you say more about that and about the status of this project if your prediction does not come true?
Yeah, certainly, through the chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the question. There's no risk to this project not moving forward. The project is fully budgeted through the 2024 water, wastewater, stormwater rate budget. So really what we're looking for is some assistance from the project so we can redirect some funds to other needs within the community.
As I thought, through the chair, just wanted to make sure. Thank you very much.
Seeing no other speakers on the list. All right, we'll move to the report, or to the vote, sorry. That carries 10-0. Moving on to 11.2, urban waste vacuum cleaner manufacturer standardization, PW24042. Director Story.
Just a simple title for you this afternoon. Hi, everybody. Angela Story, Director of Waste Management. In front of you today is a standardization report for our Glutton vacuums. So we're looking to standardize that vacuum cleaner manufactured by Glutton, so we call them Gluttons, which you've likely seen in use in the downtown core for the division, and the single source purchase of these units from Joe Johnson Limited, as they are the North American distributor of these Belgian and France-made units. We currently own and operate 4 Gluttons, which are used daily within the downtown core for mechanical loose litter management. As part of the recently enhanced litter management services at budget, there is an opportunity to expand the number of Glutton units for the downtown cleanliness program, and that allows for a more efficient litter management program, including small litter like cigarette butts. Prior to the purchase of the original Gluttons, and again more recently, we have determined that the Gluttons are still the best suited for the variety of reasons, such as their size. They are electric powered, and more specifically, they were the only unit that had a safety switch to automatically turn it off if they kind of ran into trouble. If you have any questions about the operations of the Glutton vacuum cleaner, I do have Anthony Ventura here with me today. He's our superintendent at Waste Collections, and his team operates the Gluttons downtown.
Thank you, Director. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Beatty, Councillor Jackson. Any questions on the Glutton? Doesn't look like it. Oh, wait, too fast there. Councillor Wang,
Just a
questions about the
comment that I
Glutton?
love the Glutton, that's all.
We have love for the Glutton.
Yeah.
And Councillor Crutch says he knows. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. And that carries 10-0. Good for the Glutton. 11.3, Policy 11, compressed natural gas mobile refueling equipment, PW22003A, citywide. Andrea Vargas, Acting Director of Corporate Asset Management, please introduce your report.
Good afternoon. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the expansion of Policy 11, previously approved in Report PW22003. This is for the procurement, installation, and maintenance of compressed natural gas refueling equipment. The estimated annual cost is going to be $300,000 per year, and it is required over a 3-year period. This is necessary to meet the operational requirements for the operation of 9 compressed natural gas waste collection trucks that were previously approved in council this year. I have Leslie Parker, our fleet superintendent, if we have other operational questions.
Thank you, Acting Director. May I please have a mover and second to approve the report? Councillor Beatty. Councillor Wang. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the vote. Councillor Francis is a thumbs up. That carries 11-0. Thank you. Moving on to motions. 12.1, striking open space redevelopment in Ward 2. Councillor Crutch, please introduce your motion, and do you have a seconder?
Yes, thank you. And my seconder is Councillor Kassar, I think, on this motion. As I'm remembering many chats, I apologize, but I think it's Councillor Kassar. And this is to enable the redevelopment of the Strong Linear Park, and this enables that to happen and gives a little bit of clarity about what that looks like. So installing of signage, benches, picnic tables, this kind of thing. These things are already available through Public Works staff, and they're going to work on a schedule with me to deploy these things, and so that's the purpose of this motion. Otherwise, you have it in front of you. It was notice of motion, I think, 2 weeks ago. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions on the motion? Councillor Danko, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So the usual procedure with staff for parks improvements is working with staff to fit projects into their workflow, and then depending on our parks master planning process or other master plans, then those are then added to the budget. So we all have pretty significant parks, unfunded parks projects that are not currently in the master plan. For example, the Sam Lawrence Park Master Plan is $16 million worth of unfunded capital infrastructure that Councillor Pauls and I both put in $1 million each from our ward area rating funds in order to facilitate that work. So my question through you to staff is just, is this going to just be added to the regular parks process? I'll start with that question. Thank you.
Director Graham.
Through the chair, Cynthia Graham, Director of Environmental Services. So yes, the motion directs staff to put forward a budget sheet for consideration. What we would do is look at how this project fits with all the other priorities and previous commitments across the city, and in consultation with the ward councillors, we do that planning process every year, and so that is the process that we would follow in this case.
Councillor.
Thank you, and just that if work was recommended, in order to expedite that work, that an option would be air rating reserves. I think the Ward 2 air rating reserve has more than $6 million in it right now. So just that would be an option.
Through the chair, yes. So staff would be able to identify a funding source on that budget sheet, and we have in the past identified area rating where that is a possibility, and through work with the ward councillors.
Thank you. And my final question is, this came up at the previous encampment protocol discussion meeting, that because there was going to be a HATS project at this location, that currently encampments are banned on this site, and it's the only city site site in the entire city where encampments are actually restricted. At what point will we be lifting that restriction?
Director.
Through the chair, there is an encampment report coming to GIC on Wednesday. That it would be through a report that talks about the encampment protocol that would need to be done.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crutch, please.
Yeah, I'm continually having to realize I should say more things when introducing motions. They're there, but I think it bears repeating that part of this is working with CN Railway around getting their consent to do some changes here. Because of the fact, the way that some of this has transpired, there's a multi-use path that already runs through the area. So even though it's next, the rail line is next to what's considered maybe a sensitive use, the city's already asserted its prerogative, shall we say, to program part of this area already. But that being said, there are some challenges with fencing, for instance, along this stretch. The fencing has grown into the trees, all kinds of other things. So in order to remedy these things, and again, I know that some of these things are going to have to be funded partly through, I imagine, the priorities that already come to Ward 2 for parks, and that'll have to be thrown into that mix, but also through some area rating funds. That's what's going to be ongoing here, is a bit of nuance of when's this going to start, when's the fence going to be clipped, when are we going to get a new fence, how are we going to address issues at the other end of the park. It's a very, frankly, wonderful stretch of green space in terms of the kind of projects that can happen here. And what I've heard loud and clear from staff was that there's a lot of flexibility here they have within their existing budgets and things like that, that wouldn't, or materials they have lying around, for instance, that they can supplement this with. So that's why this is on the agenda today, just to give some transparency to the subject, because I wanted residents and everybody else to be able to see this. I didn't have to bring a motion forward on it, because staff were already saying, look, we're gonna program some of these things anyways. This was here to say, this is what the kind of things look like they might be, and also just to give notice to folks that there'll be a consultation. So I want to meet with residents. It's going to happen in August, I think, to talk about all the different things that we could do here. and there's a long list of suggestions. So just wanting to make space to be able to actually enable that. When you're activating a park, it's different than when you're supporting a park that already exists. Park activation requires a whole lot of other things to occur, especially a period where people can actually access the park, figure out what's working, have consultation. So that's the whole purpose of this, is to flag this as a space that's going to be undergoing some changes in the next couple of years, and that staff will need access to the space to do that on a regular basis. So that's helpful.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no one else on the speakers list, we'll move to the vote. That carries 12-0. Thank you. I'm going to skip 12.2 if there's someone here that is able to introduce Councillor Nan's motion on her behalf. Do we have that already? Oh, we do. All right, we won't skip it. 12.2, Councillor Wang, on behalf of Councillor Nan, go ahead.
So Councillor Nan is unable to be here, but she wanted to push forward that Gage Park Community Garden that's located at Gage Park has been operating in its current location since 2011, and that the recent construction activities at the adjacent Rosedale Tennis Club has kind of reconfigured the existing fencing, and so what she is proposing there is an allocation of $6,749 to be made from the Ward 3 discretionary funds, project ID 3302309339300, to fund the installation of a new fence along the southern portion of the Gage Park Community Garden located at 1000 Main Street East, Hamilton. My seconder is Councillor Crutch.
Perfect. I don't see anyone on the speakers list, so we'll go to the vote. Councillor Francis, a thumbs up. That carries 12-0. Thank you. Moving on to 12.3 and Awaka speed cushions. Councillor from Ward 10.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, it's moved by myself and seconded by my colleague from Ward 15, Councillor Ted McMeekin. Whereas the City of Hamilton has adopted a Vision Zero approach, which considers human error as part of the roadway safety equation, and whereas Ward 10 residents on a number of roadways have repeatedly advocated for traffic calming measures in their neighborhoods to address roadway safety concerns as a result of speeding and cut-through traffic, therefore be it resolved that the Transportation Division be authorized and directed to install 2 speed cushions, sorry, Chair, I'm reading it incorrectly. Speed cushions on Grays Road between Francis Avenue and Lake Point Place as part of Transportation's 2024 traffic calming program for fall implementation, to be funded through the Ward 10 Capital Reinvestment Reserve 108070 at an upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $10,000. And that the Transportation Division be authorized and directed to install 4 speed cushions on Memorial Avenue between Glencastle Drive and Birchlawn Drive as part of the Transportation Division's 2024 traffic calming program for fall implementation, to be funded through the Ward 10 capital minor maintenance budget of number 403-191-1610 at an upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $20,000, and that the General Manager of Public Works and the City Clerk be authorized to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents with such terms and conditions in the form satisfactory to the City Solicitor. And very quickly, my thanks to members of the community who put in the effort to come forward with petitions on these 2 particular issues. These are community-led and directed, and happy to support them as they move forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bleedy. Councillor Crutch.
Thanks. That was going to be my question. I'm going to ask on each one of these speed cushion motions, fully supportive of it, but I want to understand the process. For me, it's really important to understand it in Ward 2. I think we have a very long list of speed cushion requests that'll be coming forward, and there's kind of 2 lenses, and I'm hearing one from Councillor Beatty, a petition-based approach where the community says we'd like a speed cushion. And then I know there are sometimes speed cushions recommended by city staff through a process of doing a study on the road, determining these kinds of things. I really need to understand the differences between these 2 things, and maybe it's something we can do for all these motions, is identify no, this is not coming from a city staff recommendation, or staff did this following study and didn't recommend it, but there was a petition from the community, and that sounds like those things are really important to know and understand, because I'm trying to fit these things in Ward 2 and want to make sure it's really clear to the community how these decisions are arrived at. So could maybe every mover just let us know what the process was for them to get here, and then if maybe we can have a standard process for that in the future, that'd be great.
And Counselor, I will let you know that I know the director, and she can give you more detail, but there is a report coming on process in regards to speed cushions, so I'll just let the director give you a little more detail on when and how it's coming.
Through the chair, Carolyn Ryle, Director of Transportation. So thank you, Councillor, for the question. There is a report that is coming forward next committee meeting, and it will be outlining the exact process on someone bringing forward, whether it's a resident, a ward office, a request with regards to the placement of a speed cushion, and the process that staff go through to assess and come back with whether it is warranted, so it met the different, we'll say, guidelines that we review against, or if it did not, and then what proposed next steps may be.
Thanks very much, and look forward to getting that report, but I still want to know for each one of the specific ones today, like where are we in that matrix? So if someone has that answer, that'd be helpful as we go along today, just so I can follow the bouncing ball.
So Counselor Beatty, if you want to,
Yep,
I
happy
think you
to.
explained it, but please explain.
Not an issue at all, Chair, and through you, happy to respond to the question from the Ward 2 councillor. There were traffic studies conducted on these two sites. They did not come back as staff supported, had consultation again with the community, and the community feedback is what has brought these forward.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Danko.
Thanks.
Thank you. And similar concerns, of course, I'm going to support direction to put in speed cushions, but if these are coming forward from councilor direction that don't meet traffic calming warrants, then the question is, why as a municipality are we spending money on them? So my question through you, Chair, is they don't meet design warrants. Did they meet the petition requirements for, I think it's like 70% or whatever it is?
Director?
Through the chair, so with regards to this specific motion, there was a petition that was met with the request for these speed cushions.
Okay, thank you.
No further speakers on the list, so we will move to the vote. Councillor Francis, a thumbs up, and that carries 12-0. Thank you. 12.4, installation of speed cushions in Ward 14. Councillor McMeekin, please introduce your motion and your seconder. Speaker, please.
Yep, Ward 15, seconders, Councillor Jackson. The same set of whereases and virtually the same, therefore be it resolved. I'm pleased to say, just to cut it as quick as possible, that coming out of our ward, we don't propose any speed bumps that have not been cleared properly through the staff and meeting the various criteria.
Any questions? Seeing no one on the list, we'll move to the vote. That carries 12-0. 12.5, installation of speed cushions, Ward 4. Councillor Wang, please introduce your motion and your seconder.
Thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Ted McMeekin. This is for speed cushions on Frederick Avenue. And again, the whereases are very similar. This, in terms of the additional information, was a petition from a local resident. And it looked like she had secured 76% approval for all of the houses that were being petitioned. As well, she actually went above and beyond and actually attached signatures from an online petition as well, and that was 97 online signatures as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. No one on the speakers list, so we'll move to the vote. That carries 11-0. Thank you. 12.6, installation of speed cushions, Ward 6. Councillor Jackson, please introduce your motion and your seconder.
Chair Spatafora, I will. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 15 Councillor Theodore McMeekin. Installation of speed cushions as a traffic calming measure on Huntington Avenue, whereas residents on Huntington and Ward 6 have advocated for the installation of speed cushions to address roadway safety concerns as a result of speeding, whereas signatures were collected from residents resulting in support of 19 of 34 homes on Huntington Avenue for the installation of speed cushions as a traffic calming measure. Therefore be resolved, the Transportation Division be authorized directed to install up to 2 speed cushions as a traffic calming measure on Huntington Avenue between Brentwood and Kingsley Drive as part of the 2024 fall implementation campaign, very important for my residents. B, that all costs associated with the installation of traffic calming measures be completed through the Ward 6 Capital Reinvestment Reserve account number listed at an upset limit of $10,000 not to exceed. And C, the General Manager of Public Works, Carlisle Cairns, City Clerk, be authorized and directed to execute any required agreements and ancillary documents which such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. I want to say, Chair Spatafora, has been an interesting discussion. If the former speed cushion movers of their wards actually had petitions, mine was the only one that actually listed it within the motion. So I'm just saying that as an observation. Obviously, I supported theirs and will continue to support ward councillors bringing this forward. Secondly, I want to thank petitioner Rick Woodworth. He went up and down the street several times. The other families, unfortunately, were not home. But for me, most importantly, not only getting a majority of the residents living there, but he also did not get any that objected to the speed cushion request. And it's 1 block over from 2 parks, our Huntington Rec Center, and an elementary school as well. And as always, I want to thank Elsie McIntosh for helping me with the language of the motion, and Director Carolyn Ryall for all the work her and her team did. Seconded by Theodore McMeekin. Chair Spatafora, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Crutch, please.
Thanks. So again, not going to oppose this motion, but just clarifying that the threshold for the petitions is usually 70%. I think as Councillor Jackson's saying, people didn't object to this happening. There wasn't objections to this. This is coming from ward area rating. These things are used to improve neighborhoods and communities. I understand all this. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what the guidelines are from your perspective. Director Ryall, if you could just clarify that.
Director?
Through the chair. So thank you, Councillor, for the question. So the report that's going to be coming forward will be talking about the process that staff have been undergoing with regards to any request that comes in. So again, if the request were to come in from the general public, or if it comes in specifically from the ward office, we take that request, and the first thing we do is we go out and we do a safety speed study. So we go out, we look at speeds across a number of days, we look at the volumes, and then based on the guidelines that we follow, which are industry standard guidelines, we will go back to the ward office and or the resident, informing them if they met the criteria for the installation of a speed cushion or not. Pending if they're warranted, so it does meet it, we will add it to our ongoing list, we'll say, of the speed cushions to be implemented, and that's covered for through the road safety reserve fund. So anything to do with the road safety program, Vision Zero, if they are warranted, we add it to the list and they're paid through that reserve. If the speed cushion is not warranted, so it doesn't meet the guidelines through the analysis, we go back and then there are options. A petition is always recommended. It's not mandatory. So we request that the ward councillor or the person putting in the inquiry go back and speak with the constituents on the street. And if we receive a petition, we will review that and continue to work with the ward office. The ward office also has the option to come forward with a motion for the implementation of a speed cushion if they want to support that with regards to the constituents on the street. And we work with the ward office again on assisting with the drafting of the motion to bring it forward. They'll pay through it through their funding sources, and then it's added to the implementation list and we implement it as well.
Thank you. And through the chair, a couple other things. So when I look at this, and again, thank you, Councillor Jackson, for providing the actual number of homes, 34 and 19. That's very helpful. The scope of the number of homes, is that determined and outlined by Public Works staff when they get back in touch with someone saying, look, we think there are 34 homes in the area that's applicable? Or is that number arrived at in some other means, some other way?
Director?
Through the chair. So it's usually the street
So it's usually the residential street from block to block that there's the concern of the speeding coming in. So if there's 40 houses on the street, it's usually, we're looking at the 40 houses between the block of where they're looking for the speed cushion with regards to the speeding concern. And then we'll guide as well as part of the review in dealing with the ward office.
So there is a criteria, and the criteria is the block itself that we're talking about that being within. That's helpful. I'll look forward to seeing your report when it comes forward with more information about how these things are arrived at. Just appreciate the extra detail today as we try and navigate these things. I know these are things of concern for everyone. The thing I'm hearing though, and I want, I guess, to understand this or say it publicly just as a comment, is really, in part, this is about how they're paid for. So as what you were saying earlier, if they're warranted through some kind of a thing that you've determined, it makes sense, then there's a budget allocated to pay for those. If it's not, then it can still be done, but it's going to be paid for from another source. And so part of this seems to be a financial thing, and that's some of the reason we have area rating dollars. I think though, and I just want to flag this, that in situations where councillors don't have access to additional funds through area rating or other kinds of reserve funds, I certainly, as Councillor Danko said, there's more than $6 million right now in part of the Ward 2 capital area rating reserve. Those who don't have it, well, that creates a bit of an inequity. So I just wanted to flag that and say that, you know, that's something we should think about going forward, and hopefully your policy and report will address that.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Danko and then Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to belabor the point, but so this particular motion, the recommended speed cushions don't meet the warrants, correct?
Director?
Sorry, Councillor, I need you to repeat the question.
For this particular motion for, I think it's Huntington Avenue, the installation doesn't meet the warrants?
Through the chair, it did not meet the warrant, correct?
And it doesn't meet the petition threshold, so it's basically just a recommendation of the ward councillor, which is fine, but it creates a lot of uncertainty, and I guess we'll get into that when we get that report. But my question is, what happens if there's a member of the community after these speed cushions are put in decides that they don't want them? If we don't have any criteria to decide whether they're put in or not besides a vote of committee, how do we address that after the fact?
Through the chair, so I just wanted to confirm that it's 50+1 with regards to the number of residents we're looking for on the street. So I just wanted to confirm it's 50+1, which is met in this case here for the Ward 6. But getting to the question that you're asking about, that's really the reason why we're looking for the support of a petition, because we have run into a couple situations or a number of situations where we're outputting speed cushions, even though we're communicating with the residents on that street, they can be met with a number that want them versus a number that don't want them. So the first step of it is us assessing whether the speed is an issue on the street. That's where it's warranted versus it not being warranted. And then based on that determination, if it's not warranted, we're always happy to work with the ward office and the residents on the street to assist with putting in a traffic calming measure that, you know, we think would be working out in the area. We'll talk a little bit more about it when the report comes forward, but you know, as part of the Vision Zero Road Safety Plan, our intent is to obviously want to be spending the time on the roads that truly have the safety concerns. The major arterials, the major collectors, where we have statistical data that is proving what is happening on those roadways that we're trying to turn our attention to with regards to how we want to move them forward. However, in stating that, we're always happy to work with any ward office on the concerns of their constituents.
Thank you.
Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Chair, thank you. I'll look to you to see if my question is in order, because the forthcoming report has been referenced a number of times. And I just wanted to know, on the body of that report, will it be informed by the standards that are either imposed upon us from provincial or industry standards, and or how much of it will be informed by road classification in terms of what is permitted under guidelines, and or the measures that we'll be using? For example, when we say a road, we can't put something on a road, or we have to be mindful of levels of service. levels of service is necessarily a vehicular measure as opposed to a safety measure. So I'm just kind of wanting to know if the forthcoming report will be speaking to those kinds of things that staff use in their determination of installations, design, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. So I'm going to allow this one, but I don't want to get into a full speakers list of what the report that we don't have yet is going to say. So we'll let this one go. I got Counselor Jackson next that can speak to his motion. Then we'll move on to the motion that's going to start even more discussion. Director, go ahead.
Through the chair. So thank you, Councillor, for the question. So I can confirm that the report that we're bringing forward will be talking to many variables and factors that are used in the consideration of whether a speed cushion or a different type of traffic calming are used. And we also do speak to the guidelines that we follow through TAC as part of that report as well.
Counselor?
Thank you. I'm looking forward to a robust discussion because I think it's ample time for us to talk about those standards and have clear definitions and expectations and who's prioritized in those standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Jackson.
It's been a very fascinating discussion, Chair Spatafora. Again, I'm just looking back on the 3 speed cushions from other wards, 4, 10, and 15 earlier. And they all said a number of residents advocated for this, no percentages. And in the therefore be it resolved, they all took money out of their capital reinvestment funds, which leads me to believe they didn't meet warrants, because we heard from Director Ryall, if they had met warrants, the department would have covered it. I find this very fascinating. In fact, over these 18 months, I've seen a number of ward resolutions come forward just generically, all these roads in their wards requiring speed cushions, the ward councillors saying a must, necessary, civic engagement, without any real specifics. Very fascinating discussion today. Anyways, Chair Spatafora, always good educational questions. I don't have a problem with that. And by the way, we often have talked these 18 months about, in advance, if you have any issues with your motion coming forward, let's be respectful, courteous. Not to my knowledge, unless my staff missed it, no member of council or this committee reached out over the weekend. Anyways, having said all that, my office has respectfully, consistently, Chair Spatafora, first advised traffic operations of a request, wait to hear back from them, warrants or not. No warrants, I go to the community. How important is this to you? They do a petition. I've always brought a lion's share of overwhelming majority support. Mr. Woodworth has done this. It's met the 50+1. I know he lives on the street. He could have done more, and I'm very satisfied. And at the end of the day, Chair Spatafora, warrants or not, committee and council is supreme. Thank you, Chair Spatafora. Seconded by Theodore McMeekin. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else on the speakers list, we'll move to the vote. And that carries 11-0. Thank you. Councillor Wilson or Vice Chair Wilson, can you please take the chair?
I can. Are you able to introduce your motion?
Thank you. 12.7 installations of speed cushions around Shadoke Elementary School and Mountain View Elementary School. It's moved by myself. I don't even know if I have a seconder on here. Councillor Maureen Wilson, thank you. So this is the motion that probably should have went at the beginning, because this is the motion we could have all talked about. So let's talk about this motion. Had the study, didn't meet the criteria, and I do not have a petition, and I'm okay with that, and I'll explain why. All these speed cushions around schools, all these speed cushions, I've talked to the residents that live on the street about speeding that happens around those schools. And then I've talked to the people who drive their kids to these schools. They do not live on Karen Crescent. They don't live on San Antonio Drive. Some live 9-10 minutes away in Scenic Woods and drive their kids to the school. So having a petition of people that live solely on the street, I don't know, would have caught all my constituents' concerns about how fast people drive on that street, the concerns with where they park in the HSR bus coming at the same time during drop-off. So sometimes it's not going to meet the requirement, and sometimes the petition of those 12 houses in front of the school would not be a full representation of the people that need to get to Mountain View School or Shadok School. So just to let everybody know, and you can vote against, this motion, no petition, and it did not meet the requirements from the traffic. So everything's in front of you. I have nothing else to say. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, very happy to receive that. Thanks, Councillor Spatafora. We do have a speakers list with Councillor Cratch.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that a lot. What I'm aiming here for, and I can speak a bit to what Councillor Jackson ended with, was having this discussion. And it's true. I saw a bunch of these come forward before, and actually I did say stuff during many of them, just asking incidental questions as I gained more knowledge about what the process is, and then talk to Public Works staff about how this all works in preparation for bringing my own forward. What are the deadlines? How does this all work? What are the criteria? As I'm sure you know, you have a long experience here, Councillor Jackson and other folks do, about knowing how this works, no problem. And there wasn't really an orientation for councillors around how does this process work? And so I'm learning on the fly and doing my best to read the materials in front of me to understand this stuff. And I have residents coming forward asking questions and me saying, well, I don't know the 100% complete answer to that. And what's the picture look like? And then when I find things out, I have more questions like, oh, interesting. That's an industry standard? Didn't know it was. So looking forward to this report coming forward. To Councillor Spatafora's point, there's also another criteria that gets used when staff make these decisions I learned, like, are things around schools? Are things around parks? Are there other sensitive uses? Are there places where we see fatalities or collisions? Are there spaces where we've seen pedestrians and cyclists injured? So there's all these other criteria to map on top of it. And so one of them that Councillor Spatafora is talking about is this near a school? And does that require a different kind of priority, a different kind of thinking? Not an arterial road, not a neighborhood, these kinds of things. So thanks for the context. Like, that's the conversation I think we should have, just letting everyone know what's going on. And when the report comes forward, you might even get some better language around, okay, we didn't see this was warranted from a speed perspective, but we did see it was warranted because it was next to a school or next to a park. And that changed our perspective on how we support this motion. And so I'm hopeful that as these come forward in the future, we'll have that kind of analysis. So thank you.
Councillor Spatafora, not seeing anyone else on the speakers list, so I'll call the vote, and then when that vote's done, we'll pass the chair back to you. It looks like that vote carries 11-0, and the chair's back to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. 12.8 Hamilton Beach Strip open space adjacent to Lakeside Avenue, Ward 5. Councillor Francis, please introduce your motion, and I believe I'm your seconder. Councillor Francis, you look good, but only your lips are moving. We can't hear you. Start again, please. Now you're muted. You're unmuted, but we still can't hear you. Are you okay if Councillor Maureen Wilson moves your motion and I will second it since we can't hear you? We have a thumbs up. Clerk, you okay with that? Thumbs up from the clerk. Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Thank you.
That's my Thank you. I'm actually familiar with this remnant and very pleased that Councillor Francis is seeing its removal. And so he is adding additional funding for the removal of the Hamilton Beach Rescue Lift located at the Hamilton Beach Strip adjacent to Lakeside Avenue. It will be coming from the Hamilton Beach Rescue Reserve at number 110005 at an upset limit, including contingency not to exceed $5,900, and that the general manager of Public Works or designate be authorized and directed to approve and execute any and all necessary arrangements and documents with such terms and conditions in a form satisfactory to the city solicitor. I think it'll just make for a lovely improvement to the eye on that beautiful stretch of beach. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. On behalf of Councillor Francis, He said he tested his mic part of the meeting, not sure what happened. Well, test again, sir. Moving on to the vote since we have no speakers. That carries 11-0. You're welcome, Councillor Francis. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. Any items, any other business? Great. Moving on to number 16, adjournment. Anybody? Mover, seconder, Councillor Crutch, Councillor Wang? Let's vote. That carries 11-0. Thank you, committee members. Thank you, staff. Thank you, clerks.